On the 49th floor, Manhattan looked like a galaxy somebody had poured into a glass. River black, bridges burning with tiny suns, traffic stitched into glowing seams. The penthouse was all glass and echo and curated emptiness. Architectural bravado meant to suggest a life that never smudged. It fit Ethan Kane the way a suit fits a mannequin, perfectly and not at all. He couldn't sleep. He rarely did. A single lamp warmed his office like a campfire, licking at the edges of award plaques and framed covers of magazines that told the world who he was. The boy genius from nowhere who became a man with 1 trillion lines of code at his feet. On the wall above his desk, a photo captured him ringing a bell at an exchange while confetti fell like absolution. Everyone else had their arms in the air. Ethan's were by his sides. Even then, he looked like he knew something the celebration didn't. The screen on his desk chimed, one blunt syllable in the quiet. He thumbed the notification. A trending video had been pushed by the algorithm that knew him better than most people did. He had built his bones once, years back, before ethics committees and congressional hearings had taught the industry to say responsible with a straight face. The title read, Blueprints and Bloodlines, Open Mic Night, Newark. It had been posted 2 hours ago and already had 1 million views. The thumbnail showed a teen with a microphone and a storm in her eyes. He clicked. The video was shaky, phone-captured, the kind of grit Ethan used to love, and now paid too many people to avoid. A cafe staged the size of a parking spot. A chalkboard menu behind her that said something about pumpkin spice in a loopy hand. The girl couldn't have been more than 16. Brown skin, hair in a messy bun like she'd been rushing. She wore a faded Rutgers hoodie 2 sizes too big. She took a breath like she was about to dive. My mother says blueprints don't love you back, she began. They tell you where walls should go and where windows can be, but they don't tell you why the light is always brightest in places you can't stand. A ripple of moved through the room. Ethan felt it rise in him too, involuntary, the way you lean in when someone starts telling the truth. She went on. My mother says the man who drew the first blueprint of our life was 20, broke, and brilliant enough to look at a busted coin laundry and see a campus. He used to talk about signal over noise like it was a religion. He used to say, we're going to build something that can hold the weight of us. Signal over noise. Ethan's mouth went dry. He hadn't said that phrase in public since grad school. He had said it in a cracked vinyl booth in a diner that smelled like hot sugar and oil to a girl who cut her pancakes like they were a calculus problem. Nobody else was supposed to know. The poem spooled out, unflinching. The girl spoke about a summer. In Queens, no one remembered but the people who had lived it. About a waitressing job that paid in cash and cigarettes. A boy with code under his nails and hunger in his eyes. Nights spent sketching their little empire in the margins of phone bill. She talked about the day he left to chase the sky, and the day her mother stopped laughing at weather forecasts. She talked about promises. She talked about debts that didn't fit on spreadsheets. Ethan sat forward, elbows on the desk. My mother says love is a blueprint you never got around to filing with the city, the girl said, voice catching, then steadying. I say, maybe the city never would have approved it anyway. Maybe it would have said the load-bearing beams are too soft. Maybe it would have said the foundation was poured on a night when 2 kids believed they had more time than God. The room in the video snapped its fingers. Someone whispered, woo. She looked down, looked back up, to the man whose name is printed on the side of the building that blocks our sunrise. You taught me about signal and noise without being here to show me which is which. I'm your favorite math problem. I'm the variable you forgot to solve for. My name is Ava. My mother's name is Grace. We live across the river, but we learned to look the other way. Ethan's jaw tightened. Across the river. Grace. He paused the video and wordlessly let the apartment's hum gather itself again. In the glass, Manhattan stared back. Every window a theater, every theater a different show. He was not breathing. He had not breathed since the first signal over noise. He reached for his phone. His thumb hovered over a number he didn't know he still had memorized. 917. Queens Exchange. It was a code that had once meant possibility and the price of a grilled cheese at 2 in the morning. He dropped his hand instead. Old numbers were like old maps, Sometimes they led to places that weren't there anymore. He tapped the desk intercom. Ivy. A drowsy voice answered immediately, ironing itself awake. Yes, Ethan. I need a team to do something delicate. A newer cafe, open mic night. Find the girl in the viral video. First name, Ava. Mother's name, Grace. I don't want a circus. I want clarity. There was a brief silence as Ivy Chun, chief of staff and occasional conscience, processed the nouns and the tremor behind them. Understood. Any constraints? All of them, he said, too fast. No press. No lawyers yet. This is his own word for things that mattered lodged his throat and embarrassed him. He cringed. Grateful Ivy couldn't see it. Personal. I'll move, she said softly. He hung up and replayed the rest of the video. It ended with the girl stepping off stage to a murmur of hands touching hands. The camera followed her partway through the crowd. She hugged a woman you couldn't see properly, just an arm, a scarf, the shape of someone you loved enough to make your shoulders round. When the screen went dark, the city's light returned like the truancy officer it had always been. Ethan leaned back. The chair allowed it. The past did not. They had met at the Golden Diner, which was not golden and not particularly a diner, except that it had coffee and was open when everything else wasn't. Grace had been 19 and freshly shaved out of some thread of bad luck that she never detailed. She moved like music learned in a church basement. Something old and practical and not too proud to be joyful. Signal over noise, she'd said over pancakes, chewing the words like new gum. I like that. It's what matters, Ethan had said, just a little too pleased with himself. Everything else is static, she'd finished, smiling in a way that accused him of being predictable. He'd fallen in love with that smile and her habit of leaving books face down like people sleeping, and the way she never burned the bacon even when a grill flared. He used to bring a laptop and a notebook and the kind of hunger you can't explain to people who don't have it. We'll build something that gets us out, he'd said once, so late it was early, drawing loops of arrows on a napkin. She'd looked at the city beyond the smeared window and nodded. Just promise me when you're up there, you don't forget the way back down. He had promised because 19-year-olds invent promises the way poets invent myths, out of need and lightheadedness. He had meant it, which made breaking it worse. When the offer came, seed money, California, acceleration, he'd hugged her in the alley behind the diner, where cigarette smoke braided with steam, and told her this was them, not him. She had kissed him with a hand in his hair, and a look he didn't understand until years later. The day he left, she tucked a napkin into his jacket pocket. The blueprint napkin. Hold the weight of us. She'd written in her small, stubborn hand. Come home and file the permit. He had not come home. Not really. He sent postcards for a while. Then the company ate his days, and what was left was not the kind of time you put a stamp on. The last postcard he wrote, but never mailed, had a picture of a redwood and a sentence about gravity. It took Ivy 6 hours to text him a pin and a line. Community Arts House, Newark. Thursday open mics. The girl's name is Ava Morell. He recognized the last name before he allowed himself to acknowledge it. Grace Morell. He had said the syllables like a hymn once. He had watched them drift away like smoke once. Now they came back wearing a teenager's hoodie and holding a microphone like a weapon. The Community Arts House was a converted warehouse with a heart someone had painted on it, as if the building had been cracked open to show what it contained. It sat 3 blocks from a light rail stop and 1 from a bodega that sold plantains hot enough to make you forget why you were sad. Thursday night smelled like rain and cheap beer, and would that had seen too much sincerity. Ethan went alone, hood up, wearing a navy cap that reduced his face to a geometry teacher's. He told no one. The last time he had attended anything without a plan, watchdogs with cameras had turned his accidental yawn at a fundraiser into a meme about how boredom looks when it is rich. He didn't mind jokes at his expense. He minded being reduced to a single-faceted mineral. Inside, the arts house was packed with all the kinds of people who still believe language could save you. He liked them without wanting to. He found himself a spot against the back wall and tried to pretend he belonged to the furniture. The host, a woman in glitter sneakers, called out names on index cards. Next up, Ava Morell. A little hush. A corridor opened through bodies. She came through it with the same urgency he had seen on the screen, but something else too. Something like caution. She scanned the room as if she had learned to count exits in unfamiliar places. She began a different piece this time, lighter in the mouth and heavier in the bones. It was about summer jobs and water bills and how the nice thing about rich people is sometimes they tip like gravity doesn't apply to them, and the not nice thing is often the exact same thing. People laughed and then went quiet. And then she took them somewhere else, the way a good poem does when it remembers it has a spine. Halfway through, her eyes flicked toward the back wall, where he was not breathing. For a second they looked like his. It was stupid to think so. Eyes are eyes. But there are glances that make DNA feel like a photo you've seen before. He felt heat rise at the back of his neck and willed his face to become less of itself. After the set, he stayed. He watched a kid rap into his sleeve. He watched a woman tell a story about the day she quit a job that erased her on purpose. He watched the door the girl had gone through beside the stage. He waited until waiting felt like punishment for something he had only half done. When he finally moved, the corridor from earlier was full of people hugging and arguing and making plans that probably felt like prophecies. He slid along the wall, body angled in, the way you do when you were raised to take up as little space as possible and never quite unlearned it. The door beside the stage led to a hallway where a bulletin board had thumbtacks like constellations. Mr. Kane. He froze. Years of training arranged his expression into a polite blank. He turned. A woman stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, as if to keep her own ribs from doing something foolish. The scarf at her throat was the color of late tomatoes. Time had made monuments of the planes of her face and left her eyes untouched. Grace. There's a kind of recognition that doesn't ask permission. It was that. I didn't think you'd come, she said. And in the small gap after, there were too many years to count without hurting yourself. He tried on a smile that remembered things. I didn't think I would either, apparently. She shook her head, a laugh more breath than sound. Still arrogant. He had not expected it to feel like this. A window opening in a house he had sealed shut. He wanted to say, I'm sorry and I'm glad. And I'm not the same and are you okay and why didn't you? But he had learned in boardrooms that too many truths at once just sound like you're negotiating a price. You look, he started, then surrendered the sentence. Older, she offered. The word is older. Wiser, he countered, failing humor and feeling it. They stood in the hallway like two people waiting for a fire drill to end, and then Grace did the thing she had always done when silence threatened to win. She rescued what mattered from it. Her name is Ava, she said. You know that. I never wanted this. She gestured at his face, at his cap, at the hallway, at the century. I never wanted that life to touch this one. Is she? He paused. The word he needed was not a public one. Mine. Grace let out a breath that made his name inside it. I tried to tell myself you didn't deserve the right to ask. Then I remembered it wasn't about deserving. It was about a birth certificate, with a blank line. He waited, letting the hallway become a courtroom he would not contest. Yes, she said simply. She's your daughter. Sound fell out of the world for a second. In its place was the city, the real one beneath the glass, the one that smelled like hand sanitizer and subway breaks and wet paper. He had once imagined fatherhood abstractly, a moral position he'd take if the universe ever gave him a chance to score well. Now it felt like a fact you could trip over. How? He stopped. Why didn't you? Tell you? She smiled without warmth. I wrote a letter. Then another. They came back stamped like tiny verdicts, moved, forwarding expired. No such tenant. I called the number I had until a voice that wasn't yours told me to leave a message neither of us would hear. I Googled you, Ethan. Everyone knew you. No one could reach you. There was no defense that didn't sound like an excuse. He had built a fortress and called it progress. He had outsourced whole departments of his life and called it optimization. He had assumed everything important would find its way in. He swallowed. Do you need? Help felt insulting. Money felt worse. Anything. Grace's shoulders dropped a fraction. I needed to keep her whole. I've done that as best I could. She thinks about questions she's allowed to ask. If you're here to be an answer, we can talk. If you're here for curiosity, she shook her head once, decisively. She is not a museum. From the theater, a cheer went up for a punchline that made it into the back hall late and softened. Grace glanced toward the sound, and then back at him. She took something from her pocket. Folded paper gone soft at the edges. I kept this, she said, handing it to him, and it was a napkin. The old blueprint. The loops of arrows. The promise in the corner. He had forgotten the exact curve of his own youthful handwriting. It made his chest ache. She tapped the words with a finger. You were a good architect. You were just a bad contractor. The door at the end of the hall opened. Ava stepped through, hoodie dark with sweat at the collar, eyes bright with stage light metabolizing into adrenaline. She stopped when she saw Grace's face, and then followed the line of it to Ethan's. For a split second, suspicion flared, edged with a young woman's practiced readiness to run. Then curiosity wove through it, stubborn and dangerous. Mom, she said. Grace didn't move, as if a sudden gesture might set off the alarms. This is, she looked at Ethan, 1,000 choices collapsing into one. An old friend. Old friend felt like the wrong size coat. Ava cocked her head, like from before I was born. Her tone made clear what she thought of that category. Grace's eyes flicked a question at Ethan that had nothing to do with vocabulary. He understood. He nodded, small. Yeah, Grace said to Ava quietly. From before. Ava studied him the way you look at a portrait famous enough to be on currency. The moment stretched. Ethan could hear his own pulse, loud in the pauses. He had talked to presidents with less fear. Your piece, he said, because it was true and because other truths were too sharp to touch, was beautiful. Ava didn't soften, not yet, but something near her mouth admitted the compliment without surrender. Thanks. She glanced at Grace again. Are we going to miss the train? Soon, Grace said. She turned to Ethan. We have to go. May I? He heard the boardroom again and the angle of his voice and hated it. Could I see you both again? Somewhere easier. Grace looked like she wanted to say no on principle, and yes for reasons she had slept badly with. She took out a pen and wrote a number on the back of a flyer for a youth writing workshop. If we decide it's a good idea, she said, that's the only number that reaches me. He took it like it might cut him. Thank you. Ava had been reading him the way she read poems she didn't trust yet, testing images for lie. She spoke not to him but toward the air near him. If you're who I think you are, she said, then I've got questions. I deserve them, he said, and found that true fit. Deserve is a weird word, she muttered, almost to herself. Grace's hand touched Ava's sleeve. Let's go. They started down the hall. Grace looked back once. A glance sought her from fear and faith. The door swung shut behind them with a click that sounded too final for wood. Ethan stood alone with a napkin blueprint. His thumb traced the promise as if heat could re-ink it. The hallway felt narrower. He took one step toward the main room and stopped. He couldn't follow them out into a street that had learned to breathe without him. Not yet. A shadow moved at the end of the hall, where the exit sign jittered. A man in a light gray suit. He did not have the body for pretended to read the bulletin board. He wasn't reading. He was noting. He was the kind of man who forgot to erase his tells. The little earbud, the shoe leather too shiny for this neighborhood, eyes doing arithmetic. Ethan knew the type. He paid versions of him to guard things he loved, and occasionally to keep him from making mistakes. This one was not his. The man took out a phone, thumbed quickly, looked toward the door where Grace and Ava had gone, then toward Ethan, then away. He left with a bored sort of haste that announced itself as not haste. The hairs on Ethan's arms rose. The city blinked. The moment broke. Somewhere in the main room, the host announced a last poet. Chairs scraped. Rain began to notch at the roof, steady and then harder. Ethan pulled his cap lower and slid outside through a side exit into weather that felt like a confession. He didn't call Ivy. He didn't call anyone. He held the napkin inside his jacket like he was smuggling a small, illegal hope. Across the street, under a streetlight pooling in the wet, Grace and Ava waited for a rideshare. Grace's scarf lifted in the wind like a flag that couldn't decide which country it belonged to. Ava spoke with her hands. Grace listened with her whole face. It hit him then with a clean, surgical pain. The years he had not been there to memorize how they were with each other, the ways they argued, the ways they forgave. A black sedan eased a curb. The driver reached back to unlock. The door opened. For a second, Ava turned and looked straight at him across the river of the street. It was an accusation, not exactly. It was a question that had already learned to live without answers. He lifted his hand in something that wanted to be a wave and ended up a still frame. They got in. The sedan blinked left and slid away. Ethan stood in the rain until his shirt stuck to his shoulder blades and the napkin burned a square against his chest. When he finally moved, he moved like someone who has just discovered a room in his own house he didn't know existed and is afraid of what it contains. Back upstairs, the penthouse greeted him with its museum quiet. He set the napkin down on the desk and placed a glass paperweight over it, as if it were a map and he were pinning a dangerous city. He took out the flyer and entered the number into a phone that seldom contained anything personal. He typed a message and erased it. He typed another and erased that too. In the end, he sent nothing. He left the number sitting in his contacts, an unlit pilot light. He poured himself water and couldn't drink. He stood in the window and watched the city do what it always did, insist on itself. In the glass, his reflection held a man he had become on purpose and a boy he had been by accident. Somewhere across the river, a girl with eyes like his was asking her mother questions he could not yet bear. Somewhere just beneath the noise, a shape was forming. His phone buzzed. For a heartbeat, he thought it might be Grace. It was Ivy. We need to talk. There's a tale on the girl and her mother. Not ours. Ethan looked down at the napkin under glass. He looked at the city where every light was a story with its own emergency. He made a choice that would cascade into others. The way dominoes pretend to be accidents. Find out who, he texted back. Discreet. And Ivy, he hesitated. Thank you. He set the phone face down and finally sat. The chair complained. Outside, thunder stitched two burrows together. The city blinked. The blueprint waited, a quiet diagram of a life that had not been built and might yet be, if the permits could be found, if the foundation could forgive. And for the first time in years, Ethan Kane closed his eyes and tried, truly tried, to remember the way back down. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Sleep had been optional for most of his adult life, but tonight it was impossible. The rain kept tapping at the penthouse glass, relentless, like it had questions too. He stayed in the window until the city's sodium lamps surrendered to the gray light of dawn. Somewhere in Newark, Grace was making coffee. Somewhere in Newark, Ava was waking up, maybe already typing poems into her phone, maybe already deciding she'd never speak to him again. By 7 a.m., the napkin blueprint still sat under the glass paperweight on his desk, daring him to touch it. He didn't. He showered, dressed, and moved to the penthouse like a man walking through a museum he no longer wanted to visit. When his phone buzzed again, it wasn't Ivy. It was a number from D.C., one of the quiet agencies that occasionally came sniffing when Kane Systems developed something they didn't fully understand. He ignored it. Today, only one call mattered. At 8:12 a.m., Ivy walked in without knocking. Only Ivy could do that. Her dark hair was pulled into a knot so tight it looked like it hurt, and her tablet was under one arm like a shield. We ID'd the tail, she said, straight to business. Private contractor, mid-tier, ex-federal, works for a security consultancy called Aegis North. They don't usually waste time on small jobs. Who's their client? Ethan asked. That's the tricky part, she said, tapping her tablet. They're using a cutout. Payment routed through a holding company in Delaware. Could be anyone with money and a grudge. His jaw tightened. They were following Grace and Ava last night? Yes, Ivy said. Picked them up as soon as they left the arts house. Gray sedan, one driver, two passengers. Followed them to their apartment in Ironbound. Sat half a block down for 20 minutes, then left. Ironbound. He knew the neighborhood. Red brick, iron fences. Portuguese bakeries with smells you could get drunk on. Not exactly where you'd expect trouble to come looking. Unless trouble was looking for something very specific. You want me to make them stop? Ivy asked. Ethan looked out at the river. The glass reflected his own face back at him. Controlled, unreadable, but with a muscle ticking in his jaw. Not yet. I want to know why. Grace isn't in any public trouble, Ivy continued. No debts, no criminal record, not even a late utility bill. Ava's clean, too. No school suspensions, no run-ins. Which means, it's about me, Ethan finished. Or, Ivy said, it's about her being your daughter. The word sat in the air like a lit fuse. He'd barely had time to try it on last night, daughter. It felt both impossible and inevitable. Track them, he said quietly. From a distance. They can't know. Ivy gave him a look, not quite approval, not quite warning. You're stepping into something that doesn't have a clean exit. I've lived my life in clean exits, Ethan said. They don't work. She nodded once. I'll handle it. When she left, the apartment felt even emptier. That afternoon, Ethan found himself in Ironbound without entirely deciding to go there. He'd driven himself, a matte black Tesla that looked out of place on Ferry Street, but parked 3 blocks away. The air smelled like espresso and fried cod. The sidewalks were alive with people who knew each other's names. Grace's building was a 3-story walk-up with a green awning and mailboxes that had been painted over too many times. He didn't go in. He just stood across the street, pretending to read something on his phone, until a shadow passed over the second-floor window. Ava. Her hair was loose today, falling past her shoulders. She leaned out to hang something on the fire escape railing. A damp hoodie, probably from the rain last night. She didn't see him. She was humming to herself, a sound he couldn't hear but could imagine. She was just a girl in her own life, untouched in this moment by anything he might bring with him. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're a little far from your tower, Kane. He froze, scanned the street. People walked past with grocery bags and strollers. A bus hissed at the corner. Unknown number. If you care about them, you'll back off. He typed back, Who is this? The reply came fast. Someone who knows blueprints can collapse. The message deleted itself. Not the kind of delete your phone could undo. The kind that meant whoever sent it knew exactly how to make evidence vanish. He stayed only long enough to see Ava disappear back inside. Then he left, pulse drumming in his ears. By evening, he was back in his office, staring at the napkin again. Grace had given it back to him for a reason. Not nostalgia. She wasn't the type. It was a reminder, or a warning. The intercom buzzed. Ethan, Ivy's voice said, You're going to want to see this. She walked in with a manila envelope. Inside were 3 grainy stills from traffic cameras. The gray sedan was in each one, half a block from Grace's building. But in the third still, one of the passengers had stepped out, mid-30s, shaved head, jacket open enough to show a shoulder holster. This isn't a tale, Ivy said. This is a warning. To me or to them? Both, Ivy said. Ethan sat back, mind moving in 2 directions, one toward strategy, one toward the past. He'd been in enough boardroom wars to know that threats only came when someone thought you mattered enough to pressure. But Grace wasn't supposed to be in this world. Neither was Ava. Put a watch on the building, he said finally. Quiet. If they so much as cross the street toward her door, I want to know before their second foot hits the curb. And you? Ivy asked. I'm going to see her. It was late when he knocked on Grace's door. She answered wearing jeans and a loose sweater, hair pulled back, eyes sharp with caution. Ethan, she said. No surprise, no smile. Just his name. I need to talk to you, he said. It's important. She didn't open the door wider, but she didn't close it either. Ava's asleep. Good. This isn't for her. After a moment, she stepped back. The apartment was small but warm, bookshelves spilling paperbacks, a couch with a quilt, the faint smell of lavender from somewhere. It was the opposite of his glass and steel life. What is it? She asked. There's someone watching you, he said. No point in easing into it. Her expression didn't change much, but something in her shoulders shifted. How do you know? Because I saw them, and because I had them followed. You had me followed, she said, voice tight. I had you protected, he corrected. Semantics, she said, crossing her arms. Why would anyone? They're professionals, he said. This isn't random. Which means it's about me. Which means he stopped because the rest of the sentence was the part that scared him. Which means you're in danger because of me. Grace studied him for a long time, like she was deciding which part of him to believe. I've been in danger before, Ethan. You weren't there then either. The words landed where they were meant to. He took them without flinching. I'm here now. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, what do you want from me? To keep you safe, he said. Both of you. Her mouth curved in something not quite a smile. You think you can just step back into this after 16 years, and... I don't know what I can step back into, he said, cutting her off. I just know I'm not walking away. They stood there, two people with too much history and not enough trust. Finally, Grace sighed. If you're going to be around, you're going to have to talk to her. Not as a headline. Not as some billionaire swooping in. As you. I don't know who that is anymore, he admitted. Then figure out, she said, before someone else does. From the bedroom, a floorboard creaked. Ava's voice floated out sleepy. Mom? Who's here? Grace glanced toward the sound, then back at him. Tomorrow, she said. You can see her tomorrow. Ethan nodded. Tomorrow. He left without looking back, but he felt her eyes on him until the stairwell door closed. Outside, the night air was cool, almost clean. Somewhere down the block, a car engine turned over. It wasn't the Tesla. The stairwell door closed behind him, and the night seemed to narrow. Ironbound was quieter now, the daytime chatter replaced by the hum of street lamps and the occasional echo of laughter from a bar down the block. Ethan's Tesla waited 3 streets over, but between him and it, a dark sedan idled at the curb, half shaded by an elm tree. Same shape, same gray. The driver's silhouette was just visible. No one made a move to get out. Ethan walked past without slowing, his reflection sliding along the sedan's tinted glass. He didn't look in, but he felt the weight of eyes tracking him. He made it to the Tesla, unlocked it, and sat for a full minute without starting the engine. In the glass of his own window, he could see the sedan's brake lights blink as it pulled away, turning left at the corner without haste. They want me to know they're there, he thought, and they want Grace to know it too. The next morning, Manhattan woke under a thin sheet of fog. Ethan was in the office early. Not his penthouse office, but the top floor of Kane Systems headquarters, a slab of black glass near the Hudson. The floor was quiet at this hour, the kind of quiet only broken by coffee machines and people ambitious enough to beat traffic. Ivy came in with her laptop open like it was part of her. Our tail friends are methodical, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. They're running a 12-hour rotation on Grace's Street. 2 vehicles. Always one in play, one off-grid. Police, he asked. They're too careful for that, Ivy said. Plus, I pulled the city's camera feeds for last night. The guy in the passenger seat of the sedan, he's ex-Aegis Northfield team. Got booted 5 years ago for, well, let's call it excess enthusiasm in asset retrieval. Ethan's fingers drummed once against the desk. Find out who's paying them. I'm trying, Ivy said. Shell companies are layered. Might take a week to peel it all. A week's too long, Ethan said. Tomorrow, I'm talking to Ava. Ivy studied him for a second. As a father or as Ethan Kane? I'm still figuring out the difference, he said. Grace picked a diner for meeting, an old one with a checkered floor, chrome counter stools, and a waitress who called everyone Han. It wasn't neutral territory. Exactly. It was her territory. Ava was already in the booth when Ethan arrived, head down, a notebook open in front of her. Grace sat beside her, coffee in hand, watching Ethan the way you watch a cat meet a dog for the first time. Ethan slid into the seat opposite them. The booth felt too small for the space between them. Ava didn't look up from her notebook. You're late. He glanced at his watch. By 2 minutes. She shrugged. 2 minutes can be a long time. Grace's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, more like I warned you. The waitress came by, poured him coffee without asking. He didn't touch it. So, Ava said, finally looking at him, what do you want? The question was blunt, but her eyes were sharper. Ethan knew this tone. He'd heard in investors who suspected they were being pitched something too good to be true. I want to know you, he said. That's vague, she replied. Fair, he said. I've been vague for a long time. Her pen tapped against the table. You've been rich for a long time. Yes, he said. And you didn't know I existed? He hesitated. I didn't know for sure. That's not an answer. No, he admitted. It's not. She leaned back, studying him. My mom says you're smart. But she also says smart people can still make stupid choices. She's right, he said. Something flickered across her face. Approval. Maybe. At him not dodging. Grace sipped her coffee, staying quiet. She was letting Ava set the pace. Ethan respected that. Why now? Ava asked. Why, after all this time, do you suddenly care? Because I saw you, he said. And I heard what you had to say. And I realized I'd already missed too much. For the first time, she seemed unsure what to do with his answer. Her eyes dropped to her notebook. Do you read poetry? I read yours, he said. She almost smiled, almost, but closed the notebook instead. You still haven't answered the question. I don't want to pretend I can fix the years I missed, he said. But I want to be here for the years that come next. If you'll let me. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was heavier than that, something being weighed. Grace finally broke it. That's enough for today. Ava slid out of the booth without a word. Grace followed, pausing to look at him. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said softly. They left. The booth felt colder. That night, Ivy called. They moved closer, she said without preamble. How close? 2 buildings down from Grace's, she said. Different sedan, same team. And Ethan, she hesitated. One of them was taking pictures. Not of Grace. Of Ava. His grip on the phone tightened. Keep them in sight. No engagement. Yet. Understood, Ivy said. But we're running out of yet. When he hung up, Ethan went to the desk where the napkin blueprint waited under glass. He lifted the paperweight, held the napkin in his hands. It was soft from age, creased at the corners, but the lines were still clear. The loops and arrows. The promise. He realized something then. This wasn't just a diagram of a dream they'd had. It was a map of a life someone else might want to dismantle. And he didn't know why. The morning after the diner meeting, Ethan woke with the same thought he'd fallen asleep with. Ava's face when she asked why now. It wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier. It was watchful, like she was giving him rope to see whether he'd climb or hang himself. He showered, dressed, and skipped the penthouse breakfast spread Ivy's assistant usually arranged. Instead, he grabbed a paper bag from the corner deli downstairs, coffee, egg sandwich, and headed toward Ironbound. He didn't call first. Some conversations didn't survive scheduling. Grace's building looked the same in daylight. Scuffed bricks, green awning, a row of bikes locked to the fence. The gray sedan wasn't there, but a black SUV idled 2 doors down. Different shape, same posture. He crossed the street. A man in the SUV pretended to scroll his phone, but didn't look down long enough to read anything. Ethan's peripheral vision caught the pale crescent of an earpiece wire. He didn't stop at Grace's buzzer. Instead, he kept walking to the bakery on the corner, the one with windows fogged from fresh bread. Inside, the smell hit him yeast and cinnamon. He ordered a loaf he didn't need and took a seat by the window, where he could see the SUV in the reflection of the pastry case. 10 minutes later, Grace and Ava came out of the building. Grace wore sunglasses despite the overcast light. Ava had a messenger bag slung across her chest, notebook under her arm. They walked toward the subway. The SUV eased away from the curb, matching their speed. Ethan left cash on the table and stepped outside, trailing a block back. The SUV stayed close enough to count their steps. At the subway entrance, Grace glanced over her shoulder. Her gaze swept past Ethan without a flicker. Either she hadn't seen him or she decided not to, but she did see the SUV. He knew it because her posture changed, shoulders tighter, chin down. She said something to Ava, who frowned but didn't look. When they disappeared into the station, the SUV didn't follow. Instead, it pulled to the corner, stopped, and one man stepped out. He lit a cigarette, but his eyes weren't on the smoke. They were on the stairwell Ava had just gone down. Ethan crossed the street. The man noticed him about halfway across. His eyes flicked up, registering recognition, not personal, but the way someone recognizes a face from the news. He didn't look surprised. He looked curious. Morning, Ethan said. Morning, the man replied. Voice flat, East Coast. Nice weather for surveillance, Ethan said. The man smiled without humor. You're not supposed to notice. I'm not supposed to care, Ethan said. But I do. Then you should have a talk with your friends in the tower, the man said, exhaling smoke. They're the reason we're here. Ethan tilted his head. I don't have friends. Only people I pay. The man's eyes crinkled as if that confirmed something. Then someone you pay is paying us. Before Ethan could answer, the man dropped the cigarette, crushed it, and got back in the SUV. The vehicle slid away, turning into traffic like it had been part of it all along. By noon, Ethan was back at Kane Systems, in the conference room Ivy used as her war room. A city map was on the screen, dotted with pins. Grace's building, the Arts House, the routes the tail cars had taken. They're getting bolder, Ivy said, which means either they think we won't push back, or they want us to. They said someone on our side is paying them, Ethan said. Ivy looked at him sharply. Inside job? Maybe. Or Maybe they're trying to make me turn on my own people. She tapped her tablet. You want to shake the tree? Not yet, he said. If this is about me, then we need to see how far they'll reach toward her. Ivy's mouth tightened. That's a dangerous line. So is ignoring it, he said. That evening he texted Grace. Can I take Ava somewhere tomorrow? Just us. She didn't reply right away. 2 hours later, 1 hour. Public place. She chooses. The next day, he found himself in a dusty used bookstore on the Lower East Side, where Ava was already at the poetry shelf. She looked up at him with a guarded nod. You read Neruda? She asked, holding up a slim volume. Once, he said. Once is enough, she said, sliding the book back. You don't get the point of a poet from one poem. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's true for people too. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. They browsed for half an hour. She bought nothing. He bought 3 books she lingered over without admitting she liked them. Outside, she said, You can't buy your way into my life. I know, he said, but I can remember what you like. That almost got him a smile. They were halfway down the block when he saw it. Gray sedan at the far corner, engine idling. This wasn't ironbound. This wasn't coincidence. Ava, he said quietly, let's take the next street. Why? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Because I'd rather not walk past people I don't trust. She followed his gaze, and he saw it, awareness sparking in her, faster than he'd expected. They've been around before, she said, near our building. He didn't ask how she knew. She was observant. That much was obvious. Come on, he said, steering her down a side street. They walked in silence until they hit a crowded cafe. He guided her inside, chose a table near the back. From here, he could see the street, but not be seen easily. Who are they? Ava asked. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm finding out. She studied him for a long moment. Are they here because of you? Yes, he said. Her jaw tightened. Then maybe you should go. He met her eyes. If I go, they stay, and you won't have anyone watching them. Something in her shifted. Not trust, but maybe the first crack in her suspicion. Then figure out fast, she said. Outside, the sedan pulled away. Inside, Ethan knew the blueprint had just changed again. 2 days passed with no sightings of the sedan. It was almost worse than seeing it. Silence in place of a shadow. Ethan had lived enough deals to know that when someone disappears from the board, they're not gone. They're repositioning. Ivy had eyes on Grace's street. Each report came back clean. But the absence felt like the pause before a chess piece takes something important. On the 3rd evening, his phone rang while he was reviewing a draft acquisition deal. Grace's number. He answered before the 2nd ring. Grace. Her voice was tight. She's not home yet. Ethan stood. From where? School. She texted me she'd be late for the writing workshop. That was 2 hours ago. Have you called her? Twice. It goes straight to voicemail. Ethan was already walking toward the elevator. I'm on my way. It took him 35 minutes to reach Ironbound, traffic thick with Friday night restlessness. Grace met him on the sidewalk, coat thrown over her sweater, hair loose and windblown. Her eyes were sharp with worry. I've been to the school. They said she left on time. She said, any friend she might be with? She'd tell me. Grace said, she's not the type to disappear without. Her phone buzzed. She looked down, then up at him. It's a text. No ID. Ethan took the phone from her. The message was short. If you want her safe, stop digging. Attached was a photo. Ava, sitting on a bench outside what looked like a bus station. Messenger bag at her feet. The angle suggested distance, a long lens. Ethan's voice was flat. When did this come in? Just now. He handed it back. I'm calling Ivy. They found Ava 15 blocks away, near the old industrial park. She was on the sidewalk, speaking to a man in a gray hoodie. Ivy's team had arrived first. 2 of her people standing a discreet distance away, watching. Ethan got out of the SUV before it stopped moving. Ava. She looked up, startled, then relieved, but the relief turned irritation in an instant. What are you doing here? Finding you, he said. The man in the hoodie took a step back, then another, until he was jogging toward the side street. Ivy's people didn't chase him. Orders were orders. What happened? Ethan asked. I missed my bus. Ava said. Some guy started talking to me about poetry. Said he knew my piece from the cafe. It was weird. Did he touch you? No, she said. He just knew things. About me. About Mom. Grace had reached them now, pulling Ava into her arms. She didn't let go right away. Ethan glanced at Ivy's people. "Tail him," he said, quietly. They nodded, already moving. Back at Grace's apartment, the air was thick with unspoken things. Ava sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, eyes flicking between her mother and Ethan. "Was that about you?" she asked finally. "Yes," Ethan said. "Then you brought it to us," she said. Not a question. He didn't answer right away. Grace did. "It doesn't matter how it started," she said. "It matters what we do now." Ava's voice was steady. "I don't want to stop going to school. Or the cafe. I'm not going to hide." "You won't have to," Ethan said. "But you won't be alone." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean babysitters?" "I mean protection," he said. Grace watched him. "And what happens when they decide protection isn't enough?" He didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like a threat. That night, back in the penthouse, Ethan stood at the window with the city sprawled out like circuitry. His phone buzzed. Text from Ivy. Hoodie guy met with the gray sedan crew. Same corner. 20 minutes. Ethan typed, "Keep eyes on them." All night. Then, no engagement until I say. He set the phone down, looked at the napkin blueprint under glass. For the first time since Grace had given it back, he lifted it, folded it once, and slid it into his jacket pocket. It didn't belong on a desk anymore. It belonged with him, because the blueprint had changed, and someone had just crossed the first line. The morning after Ava's encounter with the man in the hoodie, Ivy walked into Ethan's office, carrying a file folder like it might bite. They weren't just following her, she said. They were cataloging her. Ethan set down his coffee. Cataloging. She slid a stack of surveillance photos onto the desk. Ava walking out of school. Ava at the cafe. Ava through the bookstore window with him. Each one labeled in the lower corner with a time stamp and a string of numbers. "What's the code?" he asked. "Birth dates. Grace's. Ava's. Yours." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because this isn't random," Ivy said. "They're not trying to scare you. They're proving they know exactly what matters to you and that they can get close." Ethan leaned back, the chair groaning. "Who's paying them?" "That's the part you're not going to like," Ivy said. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, a Delaware corporate registry document. The holding company behind the payments had only one listed director, Alexander Kane, Ethan's father. For a moment, the room went silent enough to hear the hum of the air system. "My father's been dead to me for 15 years, Ethan said finally. "Apparently not dead enough," Ivy said. "The payment started 3 weeks ago, right before Ava's open mic went viral." Ethan's mind spun through the years. Alexander Kane, all steel handshake and cold-blooded business. A man who taught him that vulnerability was a liability, who considered empathy a flaw, who had once said at the dinner table, "We don't rescue people, we acquire them." "What does he want?" Ethan asked. "I don't know," Ivy said, "but he's not subtle. If he's circling Grace and Ava, it's because he thinks they're leverage." Leverage for what? Ethan didn't have to guess long. His father had always believed Kane's system should be run with a ruthlessness Ethan couldn't stomach. They hadn't spoken since Ethan refused to greenlight a government surveillance contract Alexander had brokered. "Where is he now?" Ethan asked. "Palm Beach," Ivy said, "but his people are here." Ethan stood. "Give me a plane." Grace didn't like the idea. "You're telling me your father, your actual father, is behind this?" "Why?" "Because that's who he is," Ethan said. "If he sees something I care about, he'll take it apart until I give him what he wants." They were in her kitchen. Ava sat on the counter, arms folded, listening. "And what does he want?" Ava asked. Ethan met her eyes. "Control." "Over you?" she asked. "Over everything I built," he said. She tilted her head. "So I'm what?" "A pawn." "You're more than that," he said. "But he'll treat you like one." Ava's jaw tightened. "Then I don't want to play his game." "You're already in it," Ethan said. Grace stepped between them. "And how exactly do you plan to get us out?" "I'm going to see him," Ethan said. Grace laughed once, without humor. "That's your plan? You walk into whatever mansion he's hiding in, and what?" "Ask nicely." "I know how he thinks," Ethan said. "And I know what he's afraid of." Grace's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" "Losing," Ethan said. The jet touched down in Palm Beach at sunset. Alexander Kane's estate was exactly what Ethan remembered. All white stone and manicured hedges. The kind of place that looked like it had never known an unplanned moment. Alexander was waiting in the study, a glass of scotch in his hand. He hadn't aged as much as he should have. Still tall, still sharp-eyed, still radiating that sense that every word was part of a larger negotiation. "Ethan," he said, as if greeting a business partner, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "You know," Ethan said. Alexander sipped his drink. "I know many things. You'll have to be more specific." "Stay away from Grace and Ava," Ethan said. A flicker of amusement crossed his father's face. "Ava. Lovely name. Strong consonants. Yours." Ethan didn't answer. Alexander smiled faintly. "Then my information is good." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Why drag them into this?" "Because you've made yourself untouchable," Alexander said. "And untouchable men only move when someone else is at risk." "This isn't business," Ethan said. "It's all business," Alexander replied. "And you've been making some poor decisions for shareholders." Ethan took a step closer. "If anything happens to them..." Alexander raised a hand. "Please, you think I'd harm a girl who might be my granddaughter? I'm not a monster." "No," Ethan said. "You're worse. You make other people do it for you." Alexander's smile cooled. "Then we understand each other." Ethan turned to leave. "Ethan," his father said behind him, "blueprints are only as strong as the paper they're drawn on, and paper burns." Back in the jet, Ethan stared out at the darkness below. The midpoint was clear now. This wasn't about random threats or some nameless enemy. This was his father, pulling strings from a distance, willing to use Grace and Ava to bend him. And if Alexander Kane was in the game, there was no such thing as half measures. It was time to change the rules. By the time the jet touched down in New Jersey, Ethan had already made 3 calls. One to Ivy, telling her to triple surveillance around Grace's building. One to his legal chief, ordering a deep sweep through Kane's systems for any contract his father might have leveraged. And one to someone he hadn't spoken to in years, a man who owed him a favor too big to forget. The favor was simple: make Alexander Kane's network visible. Every shell company, every contractor, every dirty handshake. Ethan wanted a map of his father's reach, and he wanted it fast. Grace wasn't impressed. "You think throwing more muscle at this is going to fix it?" she said when he showed up at her door that evening. "It's a start," he said. She shook her head. "I've seen men like your father. I've seen them swallow people whole. You can't just outgun him." "Then I'll outthink him," Ethan said. Ava was sitting at the table, working on a piece in her notebook. She didn't look up. "And what happens to us while you're outthinking him?" "You'll be safe," he said. She snorted. "That's not an answer. That's a commercial." Ethan glanced at Grace, but she didn't come to his defense. He pulled out a small envelope and set it on the table. Inside were 2 sleek key fobs. "What's this?" Grace asked. "New locks. Top-of-the-line electronic. No one gets in without them, not even me. Installation's tomorrow." Grace looked at the fobs like they were live grenades. "And what if they don't try the door? What if they come at her on the street?" "That's covered too," Ethan said. "She'll have a driver from now on. Someone I trust." "Another stranger?" Ava asked, finally looking up. "Great. This isn't about control," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "It's about time. Time for me to figure out how to end this." Her eyes were steady. "Time runs out." The next day, the driver, a tall woman named Carmen with ex-Secret Service credentials, picked Ava up from school. Ethan watched from his SUV across the street as Ava slid into the car, arms crossed, but not resisting. He was about to pull away when a text came from Ivy. "We've got movement. Gray sedan's back." The sedan appeared a moment later, rolling slow past the school entrance. The driver was different, younger, wearing a baseball cap, but the shape was the same. Ethan followed. The sedan took a winding route through side streets, finally stopping in front of a warehouse near the docks. The driver got out, walked to the side door, and vanished inside. Ivy's voice came through his Bluetooth. "That building's leased to a logistics company. Guess who owns it?" "Alexander," Ethan said. "Bingo." Ethan sat in silence for a moment, staring at the warehouse. This wasn't just surveillance. This was staging. The kind of place you brought something, or someone, you wanted off the grid. "Keep eyes on it," he said. All night. That night, he met Grace in a quiet wine bar downtown. The kind with low lighting and enough white noise to blur the edges of a conversation. "I know where they're operating from," he said. "Near the docks." Grace's jaw tightened. "So what now?" "You storm the place." "Not yet," he said. "But I'm going to make it clear they're not invisible." She studied him. "And if your father doubles down, then he learns what happens when you push me. Grace leaned back, eyes never leaving his. I'm not sure which of you I'm supposed to be more afraid of. He didn't flinch. Be afraid of him. I'm on your side. She shook her head. I'm afraid of what you'll turn into fighting him. Before he could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then went pale. It's Ava, she said. She's not with Carmen. Ethan's blood went cold. Where is she? She said she wanted to walk home. Alone. He was already on his feet. Call her. Now. Grace did. Straight to voicemail. Ethan pulled out his own phone, dialing Ivy. Track her phone. Get Carmen's location. Now. There was a pause. Then Ivy's voice. I've got her signal. She's 2 blocks from the warehouse. Ethan was already moving. I'm on my way. The dock smelled of salt and rust. Streetlights hummed overhead, casting yellow pools onto cracked asphalt. Ethan's SUV skidded to a stop at the corner, and he spotted her, Ava, walking fast, hood up, glancing over her shoulder. Then a figure stepped out of a doorway ahead of her, the man in the gray hoodie. Ethan was out of the SUV before it stopped rolling. Ava. She froze, turning toward his voice. The man reached for her arm. Ethan closed the distance in seconds, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting hard. The hoodie guy grunted, tried to pull back, but Ethan's grip was steel. You want something from me? Ethan said low. Try asking. The man's eyes flicked toward the warehouse. Not my choice. Ethan shoved him back. Then tell your boss. But the rest of the sentence died in his throat, because the warehouse door had opened, and in the strip of light stood a figure he hadn't seen in years. Alexander Kane. Smiling. The warehouse light spilled out across the cracked asphalt, like a stage Ethan had never agreed to stand on. Alexander Kane leaned in the doorway, a silhouette cut sharp against the glow. His suit was immaculate, his posture deliberate, the same posture Ethan had seen in 100 boardrooms, casual enough to look unthreatening, rigid enough to remind you who was in control. A family reunion in the middle of the docks, Alexander said, voice smooth as if he were greeting guests at a charity gala. How poetic. Ava stiffened beside Ethan. Her eyes darted from Alexander's face to Ethan's, looking for a translation neither of them was ready to give. Let her go inside, Alexander continued, as if this were his invitation to offer. We can talk. She's not stepping one foot in there, Ethan said. Alexander smiled faintly. Protective. Good. Maybe you've learned something since the last time we spoke. Ethan took a step forward, keeping Ava slightly behind him. What do you want? Only a conversation, Alexander said. But conversations are like investments. The environment matters. And right now, we're in the middle of the street. You put us here, Ethan said. Alexander's gaze flicked to Ava again. Your mother was right. She does have your eyes. Ava's voice cut in, sharper than Ethan expected. You're my grandfather? Alexander's smile widened. Yes. I'm sorry we haven't met sooner. She didn't smile back. I'm not. Grace's voice came from behind. Ethan hadn't even heard her approach. She was walking fast, face pale in the docklight. Ava, come here. Ava hesitated for a fraction of a second, then moved to her mother's side. Grace's hand closed tight around her arm. Alexander's eyes tracked the movement. Grace Morrell, he said, as if testing the sound. You've done well for yourself. Raised a strong girl. You don't get to talk about her, Grace said, each word clipped. You don't get to talk to her. Alexander shrugged, as if the rules of other people's boundaries didn't apply to him. This could be easier if you'd stop fighting shadows. I'm not here to hurt her. Ethan stepped closer, then stopped having her followed. Alexander's gaze sharpened, the charm thinning. Your problem, Ethan, is that you think visibility is the same as danger. Sometimes you want people to know they're being watched. It keeps them predictable. That might work in your mergers, Ethan said, but these aren't assets. They're people. They're both, Alexander replied. Grace let out a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a curse. You think we're bargaining chips. Alexander didn't deny it. You have influence over my son. My son has influence over things I need. That makes you relevant. Things you need? Ethan asked. Alexander's tone cooled. There's a government contract you've been slow to sign. Time sensitive. If it lapses, it goes to a competitor. That's bad for me. Bad for the family. It's bad for the country, Ethan said, and you know it. It's a surveillance program dressed up as infrastructure. Alexander's eyes narrowed just slightly. You always were sentimental about privacy. Ethan felt Ava's gaze on him, sharp with questions she couldn't yet put into words. "Here's what's going to happen," Alexander said finally. "You're going to sign that contract. And until you do, we'll keep talking." Ethan shook his head. "No." Alexander's smile returned. "Dinner now. Then I'm afraid you're going to learn how much noise can drown out your precious signal." He turned and walked back inside the warehouse. The door closed with a heavy, final clang. Back in the SUV, Grace sat in the back seat with Ava, her hand still wrapped around her daughter's. Neither of them spoke until the city lights started replacing the dark. Ava broke the silence first. "He's worse than you." Grace shot her a look. "Ava." "It's true," Ava said. "At least you're, I don't know, human." Ethan didn't turn around. "He's dangerous because he believes what he's doing is just business. And to him, business is survival. Then what now?" Grace asked. "Now," Ethan said, "we make it clear he can't touch you." Grace's tone was skeptical. "And you think that's possible?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the road ahead. "It has to be." By the time they reached Ironbound, Ivy had already sent him a message. "We've traced 2 of his shell companies to active government liaisons. And Ethan, there's a name attached you're not going to like." The name was one Ethan hadn't seen in years. Someone he'd once trusted more than anyone in his company. Someone who knew every weakness in his defenses. The name glowed on Ethan's phone like a bad omen. Liam Cross. He stared at it for a long moment, the memory sliding back into focus. Liam in the early days of Kane Systems, a wiry coder with a talent for breaking anything digital and rebuilding it stronger. Ethan had poached him from a rival startup, mentored him, trusted him. Liam had been there when the first major contracts came in, when they were still working out of a loft with second-hand desks and takeout containers for filing trays. And then, 3 years ago, he was gone. A mutual parting, the official story went. The truth was uglier. Liam had pushed for a partnership with a defense contractor Ethan refused to touch. They'd fought. Words sharp enough to cut something that couldn't be repaired. Liam had left without looking back. Now, he was working under Alexander Kane. Ethan forwarded the message to Ivy. Confirmed 100%. The reply came back almost instantly. Already did. He's running ops for one of your father's shell companies. Looks like he's coordinating the surveillance crews. That explained the precision. Liam knew Ethan's habits and his vulnerabilities. He'd know exactly how to get under his skin without crossing lines that would get the law involved. Ethan called Ivy. "I want him found." "That's easy," she said. "He's still local. Brooklyn. Bring him in." There was a pause. "You mean?" "Face to face," Ethan said. "Tonight." They met in a shutter bar Ivy controlled to one of her quieter ventures. Neutral ground, no windows, no prying ears. Ethan arrived first, sitting in the corner booth with a glass of water he didn't touch. Liam walked in wearing the same smirk he'd worn the day he left Kane Systems. "Well, this is nostalgic." "You're working for him," Ethan said. Liam slid into the booth. "I'm working for myself. Your father just happens to pay well." "By stalking a 16-year-old girl?" Liam didn't flinch. "Don't make it sound creepy. We're gathering information." "You're crossing a line." "You think Alexander Kane cares about lines?" Liam leaned back. "You taught me something, Ethan. Everyone has leverage. You just have to find it." "That's not what I taught you," Ethan said. Liam shrugged. "Maybe you should have been clearer." Ethan's jaw tightened. "If you go near Grace or Ava again." "You'll what?" Liam cut in. "Tank my career? You already did that once." Ethan stared at him. "You were like a brother." "And you were supposed to make me rich," Liam said. "Instead, you let your conscience get in the way. That's the difference between us," Ethan said quietly. "I still have one." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Liam leaned forward, voice lower. "If you really want to keep them safe, sign the contract. That's all Alexander wants. You do that and all this goes away." Ethan didn't move. "Get out." Liam smiled faintly. "You got 48 hours before he makes the next move." He left without looking back. Ethan called Ivy as soon as the door closed. "Lock down everything. Digital, physical. I want Grace and Ava off the grid. No public appearances, no patterns." "That'll be hard to sell," Ivy said. "Then make it non-negotiable," Ethan said. The next morning, Ethan drove to Grace's apartment. She opened the door, already frowning. "You look worse than usual." "We don't have time for small talk," he said. "You and Ava need to disappear for a while." Her eyes narrowed. "Disappear?" "Somewhere secure. Somewhere they can't reach you. Grace crossed her arms. And where would that be? I have a place upstate. Private. Gated. No one gets in without my say. Ava appeared in the hallway behind her. What's going on? They're not going to stop, Ethan said. And the man running this knows me. Knows how to hit me where it hurts. Ava looked between them. And that's me. You and your mom, Ethan said. Grace's voice was sharp. We're not hiding. This isn't hiding, Ethan said. It's buying time. Ava shook her head. Feels the same. Ethan exhaled. Please, just trust me. There was a long silence. Finally, Grace said, 1 week, and only because I don't want to give your father the satisfaction. Ethan nodded. 1 week. They left that afternoon, Ivy arranging transport that looked casual enough to be unremarkable. Ethan stayed behind, watching the SUV disappear down the street. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. 1 week won't save them. Ethan's grip tightened. The next move was coming, and he had 48 hours to decide if he'd play his father's game or burn the whole board. The safe house wasn't a house at all. More like a modern cabin built into the slope of a hill in the Hudson Valley, invisible from the road. Ethan had designed it years ago, not for guests but for himself, back when disappearing for a week meant closing a deal without the press finding out. Now it was Grace and Ava's temporary home, and they hated it. On the second day, Grace called. She's pacing. She said, I'm pacing. This isn't living, Ethan. It's breathing room, he said. It's a cage with nicer furniture. She shot back. We're not meant to be cut off from the world. You're meant to be safe, he said. There was a long pause. Then her voice softened. You're fighting him your way. Fine, but don't expect her to just sit still and watch. He knew she was right. Ava wasn't built for passivity. Neither was Grace. And neither, if he was honest, was he. Ethan's offensive started with a list. Every shell company Alexander had touched in the last 5 years, every contractor Liam had coordinated with, every subcontract hidden in harmless paperwork. Ivy stood at the table in his penthouse, flipping through a tablet as he called out names. Freeze their accounts, he said. Leak the paperwork where it hurts. Quietly. Make them spend time cleaning their own mess. You're poking the bear, Ivy said. I'm cutting his claws, Ethan replied. He wasn't naive. He knew Alexander would see this for what it was, a warning shot. But in war, sometimes a warning was as important as a hit. That night, Ethan called the safe house. Ava answered. You know this is weird, right? She said before he could speak. Talking to a dad I just met while hiding from a grandfather I didn't ask for. I know, he said. She was quiet for a beat. Grace says you used to build things, not just companies. I did, he said. Blueprints, designs, ideas that could hold weight. You should have built a wall high enough to keep him out, she said. He almost smiled. Working on it. There was a rustle in the background. Grace taking the phone. She's fine, she said, but she's restless. She's allowed to be, Ethan said. I just need a little more time. Grace's voice was low now. Time for what? To end this, he said. On the fourth night, Ivy brought him news. Your father's people are moving assets. Offshore accounts came in trusts. Whatever you did with those leaks, it rattled him. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Good. Not entirely, Ivy said. We also intercepted chatter about Phase 2. No details, just that it's personal. Everything's personal now, Ethan said. Ivy's eyes narrowed. Then you should know one of the safe house perimeter sensors tripped this morning. Ethan was already on his feet. What? Could be an animal, Ivy said. Could be nothing. But Carmen found fresh tire tracks at the service road. Pull them out, Ethan said immediately. Tonight. Ivy hesitated. That'll tip your father off that you know. I don't care, Ethan said. I'm not giving him a window. By midnight, the SUV carrying Grace and Ava was back in the city, rerouted to a different location only Ivy and Ethan knew. Grace stepped out first, eyes flashing. You moved us without warning. You were compromised, Ethan said. Or you just needed to feel in control, she snapped. Before he could answer, Ava emerged from the SUV. She wasn't angry. She looked tired. How long until we get our lives back? Ethan didn't have a good answer. Soon, he said. Soon's not a number, she said, brushing past him. Grace followed, but not before throwing him a look that landed like a verdict. Later, alone in the penthouse, Ethan stood over the city lights. His father had money, reach, and no moral speed limit. Ethan had resources too, but he was starting to realize the cost wasn't just financial. It was trust, and he was running out. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. You can't guard them forever. Ethan typed back, "Try me." The reply came almost instantly. "I already am." The attack didn't start with a bang. It started with an email. A journalist Ethan knew, one of the few who still called before running a story, sent him a draft headline. Kane Systems under investigation for illegal surveillance contract. Subhead. Sources claim whistleblower has proof CEO approved secret deal with Defense Department. Attached were PDFs, doctored but slick. Contracts with Ethan's digital signature, dated months earlier. The whistleblower was anonymous, but Ethan could smell Liam's fingerprints all over it. He called Ivy immediately. "I know," she said. "It's already spreading online. Hashtag trending." "That's one half of it," Ethan said. "Where's the other shoe?" It dropped 2 hours later. Grace called, her voice low and shaking. "Ava's gone." Ethan's blood iced. "Gone where?" "She left school early. Carmen went to pick her up, but she was already gone. Her phone's off." Was she upset? Did something happen this morning? "She was quiet at breakfast," Grace said, "but that's been most mornings." Ethan's mind ran through possibilities, every one of them bad. "I'm coming to you now." On the drive over, Ivy patched it on speaker. "Ethan, it's coordinated. The media hit is meant to tie up your attention. Meanwhile," she stopped, "we just got pinged from one of our trackers. Ava's on the move, in a car registered to one of your father's shell companies." "Where?" Ethan demanded, heading toward the docks. Grace was already waiting in the lobby when he pulled up, eyes flashing with fear. "Why the docks?" "Because he want me to come to him," Ethan said. "Then we call the police." He shook his head. "They'll tip him off before they find her." Grace grabbed his arm. "If anything happens to her—" "It won't," Ethan said, even though the certainty in his voice was acting more than truth. The docks looked different at noon than they had at night. The light was harsher, the rust more obvious. The gray sedan was parked outside the same warehouse as before. Ethan didn't wait. He pushed through the side door, Ivy close behind. Inside, the space was mostly empty, save for a table in the center and a single chair. Ava sat in it, unharmed, but clearly annoyed. "I told them I wasn't going anywhere until you showed up," she said. "Guess they listen better than you do." Ethan's gaze swept the room. "Where is he?" "Right here," Alexander's voice said from the shadows. He stepped forward, crisp as ever. "You made good time." Ethan kept his tone level. "Let her go." Alexander gestured to one of his men. Ava stood, moving quickly toward Ethan. He put an arm around her, felt her pulse fast under her hoodie. "This was unnecessary," Ethan said. "It was essential," Alexander said. "Now you understand what's at stake." "You could have just called," Ethan said. "And you could have just signed the contract," Alexander replied. "But here we are." They left without violence. But the message was clear. Alexander could reach Ava whenever he wanted. Back in the SUV, Ava finally broke the silence. "You're not winning," she said. "You're just not losing yet." Ethan didn't answer, because she was right. The night the storm broke over the city, Ethan didn't hear the thunder. He was in the penthouse study, the napkin blueprint spread across the desk, edges worn soft from being folded and unfolded so many times it had learned the shape of his hands. The past 2 weeks had been relentless. Federal indictments against Alexander Kane filled the business pages. Kane Systems board, after some very public groveling, voted to keep Ethan as CEO. Liam Cross took a plea deal in exchange for testimony, which Ethan didn't bother to fight. Revenge was nothing compared to removal. But none of it mattered as much as what wasn't in the news. Grace and Ava were safe. Truly safe. No more sedans outside the building. No more unknown numbers. No more notes. The first quiet evening after it was over, Grace came up to the penthouse. She moved through the place like she still didn't quite trust it, eyes flicking over the clean surfaces and glass walls like they might hide something. "You look tired," she said. "I am," Ethan admitted. "Then sit," she said, taking a chair across from him. For a moment they didn't speak. The city was a low hum below them. "You did it," she said finally. "I didn't think you could." "I didn't know if I could," Ethan said, "but I could not try." Grace's gaze dropped to the napkin blueprint. "That thing survived the war." "It's a plan," he said, "and plans can be rebuilt." Her voice softened. "What are you going to do with it now?" He smiled faintly. "Ask you." She raised an eyebrow. Ask me what we should build next, he said. The next afternoon, Ava came over after school. She didn't knock. She just walked in like she was testing how far she could push the new normal. She saw the napkin on the desk and picked it up. "This the famous blueprint?" she asked. "That's it," Ethan said. "It's kind of messy," she said, turning it over. "Like life," Ethan replied. Ava smirked. "You gonna frame it or something?" "Not yet," he said. "Thought maybe we could make a new one." She looked at him, unsure if he was serious. "With me?" "With you," he said. "And your mom. 3 architects." Ava didn't smile. Not exactly. But she folded the napkin carefully and handed it back like it was worth more than anything in the room. That night, Ethan stood in the window again. The city hadn't changed, but he had. The penthouse didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a place to leave from and come back to. In the kitchen, Grace was making tea. Ava was sprawled on the couch with a book, a blanket pulled over her legs. The scene was ordinary in a way Ethan had never thought he'd have. Ordinary in the way he wanted to protect more than anything. He went to the desk, picked up the napkin, and pressed it flat. The words "hold the weight of us" stared back at him. It had taken years, mistakes, and a war with his own blood to understand what that really meant. This time, he intended to keep the promise. Ethan Kane had built empires. Now he was building a life. And for the first time, the blueprint wasn't just lines on paper. It was a home,